The night did not begin with meaning. It began with routine. Daniel Harper stepped off the train with the same tired expression he had worn for weeks. The city around him, somewhere between New York and Boston, moved fast, but he felt stuck. People rushed past him with purpose, coats pulled tight, phones glowing in their hands. Daniel carried only a small backpack and a heavy feeling he could not name. He had moved here 3 months ago for a job that sounded perfect. Good pay. Clean office. Respectable title. Everyone had congratulated him. Yet each evening felt the same, long, quiet, and empty. That night, instead of going straight home, he followed a simple thought: I don't want to be alone right now. That was how he ended up at the coffee shop near the station. It was nearly closing time. The lights were dim, warm, and calm. Soft music played in the background. Only a few people remained, each lost in their own world. Daniel chose a seat by the window, facing the street. He ordered black coffee, even though he didn't need the caffeine. He just needed something to hold. Outside, the sky looked heavy. Clouds pressed low, and the air smelled like rain. Daniel watched people pass, couples walking close, strangers brushing shoulders. He wondered how so many lives could move forward while his felt paused. Across the room, the door opened again. Emily Carter stepped inside, shaking rain from her coat. She hesitated just inside the doorway, scanning the room as if deciding whether to stay. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She silenced it without reading the message. She had flown in that afternoon from Chicago for a conference she didn't want to attend. A hotel room waited for her nearby, clean and quiet and lonely. She had left it because the silence felt too loud. Emily ordered tea. Her voice was calm, but her shoulders were tense. She turned, looking for a place to sit. Most tables were taken or too close to others. Only one spot remained open, beside the man at the window. She walked over slowly and sat down. For several minutes, they did not speak. The coffee shop held its breath. The music hummed. Cups clinked softly. Outside, rain finally began to fall, tapping gently against the glass. Emily stared into her tea. Daniel watched the rain trace lines down the window. It felt strange, sitting so close to someone and knowing nothing about them. Emily shifted in her seat, reaching into her bag for a napkin. Her elbow brushed her cup. The tea tipped, spilling across the table and dripping toward the floor. "Oh, no," she said, standing quickly. Before she could react, Daniel was already on his feet. He grabbed napkins from the counter nearby and handed them to her. "It's okay," he said. "Happens all the time." Emily looked up, surprised, not just by his help, but by his calm tone. Their eyes met. For a moment, the world narrowed. Daniel noticed the tired kindness in her expression, the way she seemed both strong and worn. Emily noticed his quiet presence, the steadiness in his voice, the sense that he wasn't trying to impress anyone. "Thank you," she said softly. They cleaned the mess together, working around each other without speaking much. When they sat back down, the silence felt different now. Warmer. Less empty. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Emily." The rain outside grew heavier. They exchanged small smiles, unsure what to say next. Daniel almost returned to his seat, almost let the moment pass. But something inside him pushed forward. "Long day?" he asked. Emily let out a breath that sounded like relief. "Yeah. Longer than I expected." He nodded. "Same." That was enough. They talked about simple things at first. The weather. Travel delays. How unpredictable cities could be. Their words came easy, like stepping into a familiar rhythm. Emily spoke about flying in for work. Daniel mentioned his move and how he still felt like a visitor in his own life. He didn't know why he was being so honest. He usually wasn't. Emily listened carefully, not interrupting, not trying to fix anything. When she spoke, she chose her words slowly. She talked about expectations, about how people often assumed she had everything figured out. She said it with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The rain filled the pauses between sentences. Time moved faster than they realized. The barista glanced at the clock. Chairs were stacked nearby. The shop was preparing to close. Emily noticed first. "I guess they're kicking us out," she said gently. Daniel smiled. "Seems like it." They gathered their things and stepped outside together. The rain had softened to a mist. Streetlights reflected off wet pavement, turning the sidewalk into a quiet mirror. They stood there, neither rushing away. Daniel felt something unfamiliar, a pull, light but strong. He didn't want the night to end like all the others. Emily felt it too, a sense that this moment mattered, even if she didn't understand why. "Well," Emily said, adjusting her coat, "this was unexpected." "Yeah," Daniel replied. "In a good way." They shared a small laugh, then fell quiet again. Neither of them knew it yet, but this night, unplanned, ordinary, and brief, had already crossed a line. It had become something neither of them would ever forget. The rain had stopped, but the city felt alive in a soft, almost magical way. Streetlights glowed on wet asphalt, reflecting off puddles, turning the sidewalks into shimmering paths. Daniel and Emily walked side by side, neither in a hurry, neither speaking at first. The silence between them was comfortable, like a warm blanket they didn't want to let go of. Daniel broke it first. "You ever feel like life keeps moving and you're just standing still?" Emily looked at him, her brow slightly furrowed. "All the time," she admitted. "Like everyone else has a map, and I'm just wandering." That simple honesty cracked something open. Daniel nodded, his gaze fixed ahead but his mind racing. He wanted to say more, to share the restless thoughts he had held back for months. "I moved here for a new job. Everything should feel right, but," he shrugged, letting the words hang. "It doesn't." Emily's eyes softened. She could relate more than he could imagine. "I thought I had everything sorted. Work, plans, future, but then you get here, and nothing feels real anymore." They walked past a quiet park, leaves damp and glowing under the street lamps. The sound of water dripping from trees added a rhythm to their steps. Daniel gestured toward a bench. "Wanna sit for a minute?" Emily nodded, grateful for the pause. They sat together, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Neither tried to fill the silence with small talk. Sometimes, the quiet said more than words ever could. Then Daniel started again. "Do you ever miss things you've never had?" he asked, almost to himself. Emily turned to look at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath. "I mean, moments, connections, things that feel like they belong to someone else. But somehow, you want them anyway." Emily didn't respond right away. She traced patterns on her sleeve with her finger, thinking. "I get that. I've been holding myself back because I'm scared of feeling too much. Or losing it too fast." Daniel looked at her, the streetlights catching the edges of her hair. "Isn't that what life is? Feeling too much and risking it?" Emily smiled faintly, but her eyes were serious. "Sometimes it's easier to avoid the risk." They laughed softly at the irony. Both had spent years avoiding risk in love, in life, in the smallest choices. And yet here they were, strangers who met by chance, standing on the edge of something neither expected. Daniel felt the words pressing forward. "I've never met anyone like you," he admitted. His voice was quiet, almost scared of breaking the fragile space between them. Emily's heart skipped a beat. "I don't even know your last name," she said, smiling. "But I feel like I do." They spoke about simple things next. Childhood memories, favorite songs, odd habits no one else would understand. Daniel told her about growing up near the coast, fishing on weekends with his father. Emily shared stories of her small-town summers, running through cornfields and hiding in libraries. Every word felt honest, and every laugh, soft and unforced, built a bridge between them. The city around them faded. Cars passed, people hurried home, but they were in their own quiet world. Daniel noticed the way Emily's hand moved when she laughed, and Emily noticed the way he leaned in slightly when listening, like every word mattered. They spoke of heartbreak too, of love lost and opportunities missed. Daniel admitted he had once let someone slip away because he was too scared to fight for them. Emily shared a failed relationship, the kind that ended not with anger but quiet resignation. They didn't dwell on the pain, but they didn't shy away from it either. Time passed unnoticed. Daniel checked his watch and realized hours had gone by, yet it felt like minutes. "I didn't even notice the time," he said. "Wow." Emily nodded, her hair damp from the lingering mist of rain. "It's like, talking to you makes the world pause." A gentle wind blew down the street, carrying the faint smell of wet leaves and distant coffee. Daniel shivered slightly. Emily noticed and offered her scarf. "Here," she said. "Better than standing in the cold alone." He accepted it, fingers brushing hers briefly. The touch was fleeting but electric. Both felt it. Neither mentioned it. Daniel suggested walking a little more, and Emily agreed. They wandered down side streets, laughing at small jokes, sharing memories, and asking questions that seemed ordinary but felt deeply intimate. They spoke about what they wanted from life, not careers or money, but connection, love, and meaning. Emily admitted she often felt like life was happening to her, not with her. Daniel nodded, sharing that same hollow sense of watching life from the sidelines. Together, their confessions created a space where honesty didn't feel dangerous. It felt safe. They stopped near a quiet bridge overlooking the river. The water reflected the lights, rippling softly. Neither spoke at first. Daniel finally said, "I'm glad I didn't go straight home tonight." Emily looked at him, heart-stirring. "Me too," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. They lingered there, side by side, feeling the city breathe around them. It wasn't romantic in a sudden, dramatic way, but in the quiet way that mattered, the kind of feeling that grows slowly, rooted in understanding, honesty, and shared solitude. Daniel wanted to tell her more, but words failed him. Emily wanted to stay longer, but reality waited in her hotel room. And still, neither moved. The night had become theirs, small and fragile, held together by shared stories, laughter, and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, they had found something real. Eventually, the barista's voice from the now empty coffee shop echoed in their minds, closing time. The night outside felt infinite, yet fleeting. They both knew this could end, but neither wanted it to. As they walked back toward the streetlights, their hands brushed almost by accident. The contact lingered, a promise neither spoke but both felt. Daniel wanted to ask her to stay, to continue the conversation until morning. Emily wanted to tell him everything, to not let this night go without meaning. But fear and reason held them back. So they kept walking, talking in whispers, laughing softly, sharing pieces of themselves too small to be told to anyone else. They didn't know how this night would end. They only knew it mattered. By the time they reached the quiet hotel where Emily was staying, the city had grown still again. Rain had returned as a faint mist, leaving the streets glistening. They paused at the curb, neither willing to say goodbye, yet knowing the moment demanded it. Daniel looked at her, wanting to capture everything in a single glance. Emily did the same, memorizing the tilt of his head, the curve of his smile. "Will I see you again?" Daniel asked, the question both casual and heavy. Emily didn't answer immediately. She shook her head slowly, smiling softly, as if the answer wasn't important. "I don't know," she said quietly. That uncertainty hung between them. It was not sad. It was full of possibility. It was fragile, yet alive. When Emily finally turned to go inside, Daniel stayed on the sidewalk a moment longer, watching her disappear into the hotel. He felt a pull he didn't understand, a warmth that stayed long after she had vanished. And Emily, leaning against her door, felt the same. Something had shifted. Something had begun. Neither would forget that night, the one that started by accident, the one where strangers spoke like old friends, where rain made the world softer, where hearts opened without warning. It was only part 2 of the story, but already, it had changed everything. The night air had a cool bite as Daniel and Emily stepped away from the hotel. The city had gone quiet again, the hum of traffic replaced by distant sirens and the soft rustle of trees. Street lights reflected on puddles, making the sidewalks look like rivers of light. Neither spoke immediately. Words felt heavy now, as if everything they might say could change the fragile moment between them. Daniel broke the silence first, his voice low. "Do you ever wonder if you're making the right choices?" Emily glanced at him, her eyes reflecting the golden glow of the streetlights. "All the time," she said. "Life feels like one big decision after another, and you never know which one will matter." Daniel nodded, thinking of his move, of leaving friends behind, of chasing a career that felt hollow at times. "I guess," he said slowly, "sometimes the hardest choice isn't about work or money. It's about people." Emily looked down at her hands, her fingers brushing the edge of her coat. "I know what you mean. There are moments when you meet someone, and you feel something you can't explain. But life waits, and you have to decide." Their steps slowed as they reached a quieter street, away from the city lights. Shadows stretched across the walls, and the mist from earlier had returned, softening the edges of the buildings. Daniel felt the pull of the moment, the urgency of unspoken emotions, and the quiet pressure of knowing that what happened next would matter. "I'm not good at moments like this," he admitted, stopping mid-step. "I don't know what to say or what to do." Emily tilted her head, a small smile touching her lips. "Then don't say anything. Sometimes, not saying anything says the most." They stood there in silence, shoulders almost touching. Daniel's mind raced, remembering every laugh, every shared memory from the coffee shop and the streets. He wanted to ask her to stay, to continue the night, to not let this fleeting connection slip away. But he also knew the truth. Emily had a life in another city. She had responsibilities, routines, things waiting for her that weren't him. Choosing to step forward tonight meant risking heartbreak. Walking away meant holding on to a memory, perfect and safe. Emily shifted slightly, breaking the tension. "This is where I turn," she said softly, her voice steady. Her hotel was just a block away, and reality pressed in around her. Daniel swallowed hard. "Will I see you again?" he asked. His words were almost a whisper, heavy with hope and fear. Emily looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment, it felt like time had stopped. Her heart raced, her mind flooded with possibilities, yet reason tugged at her sleeve. She could stay, risk the unknown, step into a story that might end in pain. Or she could walk away, preserve the memory, and carry it forward quietly. She hesitated. The silence stretched, almost unbearable. Daniel wanted to reach out, to take her hand, to anchor the moment. But he didn't. He respected the choice, even as every part of him hoped she would choose differently. I don't know," she said finally. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, to convince her, to promise that staying would be safe, that they could make it work. But he didn't. He nodded slowly, understanding that sometimes love begins with letting go. Emily took a step closer, just enough to brush against his shoulder. It was brief, almost accidental, but it carried meaning. Neither spoke. Neither moved. The city around them seemed to hold its breath. Daniel finally spoke, his voice quiet but certain. "Tonight. I won't forget this." Emily smiled, small and bittersweet. "Neither will I." She turned toward the hotel, hesitated, and then walked inside. Daniel watched her go, the sound of the door closing echoing in the empty street. He felt a strange mix of relief and pain, the relief that she was safe, the pain of knowing that this night, this perfect night, might be their only one. He stayed on the sidewalk for a few moments, letting the emotions settle. He replayed the conversations, the laughter, the quiet honesty they had shared. The way her eyes had softened when she talked about her fears. The way his heart had leapt at her small smile. Daniel finally started walking again, retracing their steps through the quiet streets. The city felt different now, softer somehow, as if it had shifted to accommodate what had happened between them. He walked slowly, savoring the memory of Emily's presence, the sound of her voice, the warmth of her laughter. He thought about choices, how one night, one conversation, one decision, could change everything. He realized that sometimes the right choice isn't the one that's easy or safe. Sometimes the right choice is the one that scares you, that makes your heart ache because it matters. Emily, meanwhile, sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the rain-streaked window. She could still feel Daniel's hand brush hers, still hear his quiet laugh. Her heart wanted to chase the night, to run back into it, to see where it could lead. But her mind reminded her of reality, the obligations, the distance, the lives waiting for them in different cities. She hugged her knees to her chest and let the silence fill the room. She didn't cry. She didn't sigh. She just felt. Every heartbeat reminded her that something profound had happened, something she would carry with her forever. The night had tested them. It had offered a choice between safety and truth, between memory and risk. Emily had chosen the memory, the safety, and yet that didn't make it any less significant. She had stepped into honesty, felt the pull of connection, and allowed herself to experience something real. Daniel walked home under the same quiet sky. His steps were measured, reflective. He knew the night would stay with him, the conversations, the laughter, the fleeting moments that felt like eternity. He knew he would think of Emily at random times, in coffee shops, on quiet streets, in moments when life felt ordinary and dull. The decision they made, or didn't make, was heavy with meaning. It wasn't dramatic or reckless. It wasn't a passionate confession or a cinematic chase. It was quiet, simple, yet unforgettable. Two strangers had met, shared pieces of themselves, and faced a choice that would mark their lives forever. Daniel entered his apartment, closed the door behind him, and sat by the window. He looked out at the city lights, remembering the warmth of Emily's presence, the honesty of their conversations. The night had ended, yes, but the memory was alive, vivid, impossible to forget. Emily lay down in her hotel room, staring at the ceiling. She traced the lines in her mind, Daniel's laughter, his calm eyes, the shared silence, the gentle connection. She had chosen to leave the night behind physically, but emotionally, it was hers to keep. And in that quiet, reflective space, both Daniel and Emily understood something essential. Life often gives fleeting moments, brief intersections with people who matter more than words can capture. Those moments demand choices, choices that are rarely easy, always significant. Sometimes, the hardest choice is the one that protects your heart, even as it leaves you yearning. Sometimes, the most profound connections are the ones that exist for just a single night. And sometimes, letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying the memory forward, letting it shape who you are, and understanding that some nights are meant to be eternal in memory, even if they cannot be eternal in reality. The night was over, but the decision lingered, sharp, soft, unforgettable. Two strangers had shared something rare, something meaningful, and the memory would follow them both, shaping the way they approached love, life, and the next chance that might come. It was a choice that neither would regret, a decision made in quiet honesty, under streetlights and mist, in the soft embrace of a city that seemed to pause just for them. That night had been theirs, and though the streets were empty now, its echo would remain forever years later. Daniel still remembered that night with a clarity that surprised him. The memory wasn't sharp like a photograph, it was soft, warm, and alive, like a song that played quietly in the background of his life. Every time he walked past a quiet street or a coffee shop window, the image of Emily would surface. He would remember her laughter, the way her eyes seemed to hold both courage and hesitation, the way her voice sounded when she admitted she didn't know the answer to his question. Life had moved forward, as it always did. Daniel had grown into his job, made friends, and built routines. Yet, amid all the ordinary days, the night with Emily remained extraordinary. He realized that it wasn't just about her, it was about the honesty, the vulnerability, the rare connection that had happened in a city full of strangers. It had shown him what it meant to truly meet someone, to share yourself without pretense, to feel seen. Emily carried it too. In her apartment in Chicago, she sometimes paused in the middle of her busy life and thought of Daniel. Not often, not obsessively, but enough to feel the pulse of that night. She remembered the quiet streets, the misty rain, the way he had listened without judgment. She remembered the decision she had made, not to chase something uncertain, not to risk what could have been, yet still to hold it close in her heart. They hadn't stayed in touch. Phone numbers were never exchanged. Emails were never sent. They hadn't tried to recreate the magic, because that magic wasn't meant to be repeated. It was one night, brief and fragile, a perfect intersection of timing and emotion. They both understood that. And yet, that understanding made it no less impactful. Daniel sometimes wondered about the choices he had made since. He wondered if he had played it safe too often, if he had avoided risks because he remembered how fleeting beauty could be. He thought of Emily not with regret, but with gratitude. That night had changed him. It had opened his heart to the possibility of connection, to the understanding that vulnerability wasn't weakness, and that some people touch your life without staying in it. Emily had moments like that too. When life got overwhelming, when decisions loomed, she would remember Daniel's calm presence, his quiet honesty, the way he had made her feel like she mattered without demanding anything. She realized that some people, some connections, are meant to teach us lessons about ourselves rather than become permanent fixtures in our lives. That night had taught her to recognize and honor the depth of feeling when it arrived, even if it was brief. The city itself seemed to hold pieces of that memory for Daniel. Rain-soaked streets, soft streetlights, quiet corners, he would find himself transported back to that night without warning. A cafe with the same aroma of coffee and tea. A bench in the park where shadows stretched long. Even the sound of rain tapping against glass made him smile softly to himself, remembering how natural it had all felt, how easy it had been to connect. Emily, on her side, noticed similar things. She walked past familiar streets, caught the scent of coffee from a shop, or watched the rain slide down her window, and she was there again, laughing quietly with Daniel, sharing stories, walking without purpose, holding a moment that had no agenda except honesty. Those memories weren't painful, they were comforting, proof that beauty could exist in the simplest interactions. Both of them occasionally wondered, what if they had chosen differently? What if Emily had stayed? What if Daniel had asked her to walk with him a little longer, to chase the unknown? But even those questions didn't carry the sting of regret. Instead, they held a bittersweet tenderness, a recognition that life had been richer for that brief encounter. They realized that some nights exist not for permanence, but for transformation. Daniel sometimes shared the story, in fragments, with friends. He never mentioned names, only the feeling, the way the night had shifted his perspective. Friends noticed that he spoke differently about connection afterward, that he listened more carefully, that he noticed the small gestures that carried deep meaning. That one night with Emily had influenced the way he approached relationships, friendship, and even strangers he met on the street. Emily carried it privately. She didn't tell many people, not because she wanted to hide it, but because it was sacred in a way words could not fully capture. When she shared it with herself, late at night, she found clarity and strength. She realized that connection doesn't always require permanence to be profound. Some encounters are meant to shape the soul quietly, to remind us of what love and honesty feel like when stripped of expectation. They both lived lives that could have been ordinary, but that night had given them a touch of something extraordinary. Daniel remembered the laughter, the shared confessions, the tender pauses, and the decision Emily had made. He understood now that letting her go had been the right choice, even if it had hurt in that moment. It was an act of respect for her life, and for the integrity of the connection they shared. Emily remembered Daniel's quiet strength, the way he had made space for her emotions, the way he had respected her decision without complaint. She realized that part of loving someone, or feeling a connection, is allowing them to exist in your life fully without holding them. That night had taught her patience, understanding, and the importance of honoring emotions, even when circumstances prevented them from becoming permanent. The memory remained vivid not because of what they did, but because of how it made them feel. It was honest, raw in its simplicity, and entirely theirs. They had shared no promises, no vows, no grand declarations, just presence, laughter, vulnerability, and understanding. And in that simplicity lay the beauty. Years later, Daniel found himself walking past a bridge in his city, rain lightly falling, and he paused. For a moment, he closed his eyes, and there she was, Emily, walking beside him, laughing quietly, sharing a story he could almost remember word for word. He smiled softly, letting the memory fill him. It was bittersweet, yes, but it was alive. Emily, on her side, sat by her apartment window on a rainy evening, staring at the reflections of city lights on wet streets. She could almost feel Daniel's presence beside her, the warmth of his hand brushing hers, the calm honesty of his voice. She smiled and whispered a quiet thank you to the memory, to the night, to the man who had changed her understanding of connection without ever staying. They never needed closure, letters, or meetings. Closure would have diminished the magic. The night was perfect because it existed as it was, fleeting, honest, and unforgettable. They carried it forward as a lesson in love, life, and human connection. Sometimes, the deepest bonds aren't measured in years or months. Sometimes, a single night is enough to alter a life, to awaken emotions long dormant, and to teach lessons that endure for decades. Daniel and Emily understood that now, and both felt grateful. They had met as strangers, shared a moment of unparalleled honesty, faced a decision, and let it go with respect and understanding. The night lived in them, in memories, in reflections of rain, in quiet streets, and in fleeting laughter at unexpected moments. It was a memory they returned to often, not for what it could have been, but for what it was, a pure, unbroken moment of human connection. And in that truth, both Daniel and Emily found peace, warmth, and a gentle reminder that love doesn't always need permanence to be real. Some nights are meant to stay in the heart, untouched, unchanging, and unforgettable. That one night had ended, yes. But its echo remained, softly, persistently, beautifully, a memory neither would ever forget. It was a story they could carry silently, privately, with a smile that spoke of longing, tenderness, and the quiet power of a single connection. In the end, they realized that life often gives us these moments. We cannot hold them forever. We cannot force them to continue. But when they come, when the timing is perfect and the honesty is raw, they teach us everything we need to know about vulnerability, courage, and love. Daniel and Emily had learned it. And in their hearts, that night would always live, timeless, untouchable, and unforgettable. R.